Well, I'm not really sure what the total number of participants is, but the chat rooms are really full. The summits and workshops are really well attended, and lots of very interesting topics. And I even see more diverse participants from different countries and backgrounds. So I think it's actually really well done. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is people playing and talking to people all around the world. Gaming has a very global reach. I think, for example, a very big contingency from Brazil taking part this year.
Yeah, I mean, this pandemic has really shown that the gaming is a truly global industry. At this conference, I'm seeing developers from all over the world, as you mentioned, not just from like the traditional game developing powerhouses like the US, UK, and Japan. They're always going to be there. But I'm also seeing delegations from, like you mentioned, Brazil. I'm also seeing delegations from Switzerland, Austria, smaller countries like Singapore. So it's really great. The pandemic has really shown how gaming really has no borders, and it's just nice to see how many different people are just coming along and participating in the global industry. Yeah.
Google announced a Play As You Download update. What are some of the biggest advances from this year's conference?
Well, I am seeing a lot of very interesting things. So from a very social perspective, as aforementioned in the segment earlier, we're seeing a lot of attention being paid to the very important topic of accessibility. So we're seeing a lot of talks on focusing on how the industry, what the steps the industry needs to make it more welcoming for diverse developers, and also making games safe and inclusive for different audiences. So today, also, for example, is a very interesting talk today discussing the role that streaming platforms need to play in ensuring a safe and inclusive environment while keeping audiences engaged. It's important because there's sort of a little bit of trade-off that people do tend to think that, hey, to make the audiences engaged, you need to maybe be a little bit edgier. So we're really discussing steps like what industry could do to sort of mitigate that little bit of a trade-off to make the environment safer for everyone. From a business development perspective, I'm also seeing a lot of attention being paid on monetization and value capture within the industry. So it's quite interesting for me because it's quite clear now that the value creation bit is already pretty clear. Everybody knows that the gaming industry is huge. That's not in question anymore. So we're seeing a lot of discussion now really swing towards value capture. So how do developers, publishers, and other players really capture value in the ecosystem? So there, for example, today there were several discussions on how do you broaden this audience appeal of electronic sports or esports, right? While making it more sustainable because costs, for example, might be going spiraling out of control. So how do we make it more sustainable so that the whole system is able to keep going for a longer time? And lastly, from a more games development perspective, there's so many interesting new development. I'm just going to pick out one that caught my attention. There's this development of very interesting adaptive games with customized experiences of different players. So I think the industry term they use here is called user-centric adaptive experiences. So basically, through the fusion of VR, sensors, and machine learning, and AI, developers are now able to create customized gaming experiences for players. So for example, you have advanced sensors in the gaming hardware. They're able to measure the cognitive load in players, how much effort the players are actually exerting, how much interest they're actually showing in the games, right? And then with that, you could actually customize the gaming experiences for each individual gamer. So different players will experience the game differently depending on how much interest they have or how much aptitude they have for the games. And that's really, really cool and really potentially industry changing. And you can imagine that the number of applications are really immense. So for example, corporate training and education industry is really going to benefit from this. So all these are really interesting developments that we see swing so far. I'm really looking forward to the next 2 days.
And just briefly, you mentioned diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
We heard that in that report, 60% of women masking their gender. We heard people dealing with racism. Are you surprised by these figures, and have you experienced any of that?
Well, I'm a researcher in the games, and this is a topic that we are deeply interested in. Let's not hide the truth here. It really happens. But I don't think that it's a situation which we cannot change. For example, we're seeing increasingly that even more traditionally sort of masculine esports kind of titles, we're seeing female players really get into game and doing really, really well. I think it's a situation that change in time. What we need to do as a community is to come together, make sure we stem out any sort of like really abusive or undesirable behavior. And I think, we can create an environment that every player, regardless of race or gender, will be able to have fun and, just game.